Now, do you find yourself struggling with the limitations of the standard WordPress setup and you want to expand it, but you don't really want to have to rely upon themes that have specific features or plugins that you have to shoehorn into what you want to create? Better if you can create this for yourself. You get a lot more flexibility and a lot more expansion in the future should you want to move beyond what you create right now. So for this example, we're going to be using a fictitious website I've created. This is all about an accommodation-based business. It's effectively a listing website. So even though this is using accommodation as the backbone of it, this could easily be real estate, job listings, or any manner of other different types of listing websites. So what we have is basically a site that gives us information about different accommodation. You can see if we scroll through on the homepage, this is the list of accommodation, and you can expand this as far as you want. So what we have is basically a custom post type that is accommodation, and inside there we have some standard information like the featured image, the title, the description. However, we also have some additional meta fields, additional information, different taxonomies and so on. I don't want to explain all these terms as we go through. So if we take a look, for example, at Rocky's View, we've got the featured image, we've got the name, and we've got the description, but we also have the price per day. We've got the location, the country, we've got the website. If we click to go into this, you'll see we have a nice looking layout where we've got information about the actual accommodation itself, and we can put whatever we want inside here. We've got contact information, and this is a mix and match of dynamic data. We've added in custom meta fields and so on, and also standard kind of WordPress features. So we kind of put the two together to give us huge amounts of flexibility. If we come back up to the top, you'll see we've got location, and inside there we've got the different locations. We've got properties, so for example, Australia, Canada, and so on. If we click on Canada, that will now show us just the Canadian properties. And if we take a look on the left-hand side, we've also got some filters inside here, so we can see we only want the ones that are under luxury and opulence. And then we can kind of filter this down. We can go from prices and so on. If we come into types, you can see we've got different types of accommodations. We may have hotels, inns, sort of luxury, opulence, accommodation for groups, and so on. So if we click on the luxury and opulence, you can see this takes us into another page where we've got a different, similar set of filters, different properties now that fit into that particular category or that particular taxonomy. And this is what I'm going to show you how to create in this video. So now we've seen what we're going to create. Let's take a quick look at the tools we're going to use to create it. Now, don't worry if you're not using exactly the same tools as me. There's still a lot you can take away from this to understand how dynamic data works inside WordPress itself. So stick around. There's timestamps in the description so you can jump around should you need to and just check out the bits that you want. Otherwise, let's take a look at the tools. So first of all, we're going to be using GeneratePress for the theme of choice. We're going to be using the Pro version because I want to use the templating feature inside here. We're also going to be using GenerateBlocks. Again, we're going to be using the Pro version. However, you can do an awful lot of what I'm going to cover with the free version of GenerateBlocks because that includes quite a lot of really cool dynamic data sort of features, including the loop builder. So do check that out for yourself. We're also going to be using advanced custom fields. We're going to use the totally free version of this. So again, you can follow along to find out exactly how to get started using ACF. And finally, we're going to be using GridBuilder to deal with the facets and the filtering side of things. All the links for everything I've covered are in the description below as well for ease. So the first thing we need to do is go ahead and set up the data structure that we're going to use using advanced custom fields. Like I said, this is the free version so you can follow along without spending any cash. So once you've installed all the plugins, you're going to have a new entry on the left-hand side called ACF. So for this, we're going to come into the post types. Now the post type allows us to create our own custom post type. Now we could, if we wanted to, use the inbuilt posts feature in WordPress itself, but that kind of limits some of our flexibility. So it's much easier to just create something totally unique. Now once we're in the post types, all we're going to do is click on Add New. And this then opens up the options for us to create our new post type. So for this, we're going to call our plural label is accommodation and our singular label is accommodation as well. And you'll find if we click underneath, it'll automatically pre-fill out the post type key. And this is what you'd use for your navigation and so on. So if you want to change this, now's a good time to change it. But in this example, accommodation works perfectly fine. Now underneath you'll see we've got some options for whether we want to make this public, which we obviously do, and whether this is a hierarchical setup. For this example, we'll leave this as it is. But you can at any point come back in and make changes. The only thing I would recommend you don't change, that you do it right now before you actually save those changes, is if you want to change the post key, now's the best time to do it. Okay, we could, if we wanted to, leave it at this point. However, we're going to go into the advanced configuration options. Now, don't be scared. This is something relatively simple and straightforward, and we only need to make a couple of tweaks inside here. So once you open this up, you'll see this gives us a set of different tabs that we can access with various different pieces of information. First of all, we want to make sure that this has got supports. Now, this is the default WordPress features. So when you create a post, you'll find you've got things like titles, you've got the editor, you've got the featured image, author, excerpt, and so on. So we're going to leave the first three of these enabled. So the title, editor, and featured image. But if you wanted to add more in, you could do that by checking any of these options. And again, you could come back at any time and add additional ones in. If you want to add a description in, you can do that here. So we'll just say it's a list of properties for rent. We want to make sure this is active. We can come into the labels, and this is where you can change what you'd normally see down the left-hand side. So for example, where you come to posts, you've got all posts, add new categories, and so on. Well, we could customize that for any of our new custom post type. So for example, we've got accommodation, all accommodation, edit, and so on. And you can see all the different options you'd expect to see are inside here. However, we can and we will leave all of those at their default values. But if you want to change them for whatever reason, you could do that inside here. Visibility then just shows where and when we want to display the various different custom post types, meta fields, and so on inside the actual dashboard of WordPress. So if we take a look, you can see we've got things like show in UI. So in other words, we want to show it inside our user interface in the dashboard. So we've got new, for example, it'll be included in there. No, you kind of get the picture. If you want to customize various different options inside here, you can do. However, if you're not sure, leave it alone. What we're going to do, though, is we're going to set a menu icon. And we can use the dash icons. All you need to do is just copy the little link that you get from there. And you can see you can jump over at any point and take a look at those dash icons by clicking on this link. And that will show you the dash icons. And you can see there's the actual text that you're going to grab to simply go ahead and drop inside this box here. So once you set the dash icon you want to use, you can change any other parameters. We're going to leave everything as it is. We're not going to exclude this from the search. We're also going to come into the URLs, and inside here, we're going to leave most of this at the default. However, we are going to choose the option to have an archive. We'll just select that, and if you want to put the archive slug in, you can do. So we could put accommodation inside here. But if you wanted to, you could also just go ahead and leave this blank. We'll leave all the other options as they are. We don't need to change anything inside there. We can come into permissions, and inside here, you can set any options you want, but we're going to leave that as it is, and the REST API, we're not going to touch that. So we'll hit Save Changes, and that will then create our new custom post type. So you can see on the left-hand side, we've got accommodation, and inside there, we've got all accommodation and add new. So these are just the basic options. Now you'll notice that once we've created this, we now get 3 additional options: to add fields to accommodation, to link existing field groups if we've created them previously, or to create a new taxonomy. So we want to group our accommodation by various different options. And this is what's called a taxonomy. And a taxonomy just allows you to group things together. So if you come over from the standard WordPress, you'll know that when you've got posts, you've got categories and you've got tags. They're simply taxonomies, ways of grouping your information together into logical groups. So for our example, we want to create a new taxonomy. What we're going to do is we're going to, again, give it the label. So this is very similar to what we've seen creating the post types. So what we're going to do with this is we're going to say accommodation location. We'll put in a plural on there, accommodation locations, and we'll put the singular underneath, accommodation location. And you'll see, again, it automatically creates that taxonomy key for us. You'll see because we've chosen that little green option, it says it automatically links it to our post type of accommodation. But if it didn't, you can simply click inside there and choose whatever post type or types you want to link this custom taxonomy to. Then we've got options for making it public or hierarchical, and if you want to, again, you can leave it exactly at this point. You don't need to go into the advanced configurations if you don't need to. Now for our example, I'm going to use the hierarchical option. Now, even though we're not using a hierarchy, I just find this makes the whole interface inside WordPress just a little bit nicer and easier. We can just simply check the boxes for any of the different locations we want to associate things with. If we jump into the advanced configuration, again, you can see inside here, we've got a range of different tabs we can go through, general, labels, and so on. So a lot of these are exactly the same as we've just seen. We can go in, if we want to set the labels, we can come into visibility. We can set options inside there. We're going to say we want to show this in the admin column. It just makes housekeeping just a little bit easier. And again, we can change the URLs if we want to. We'll set this to be hierarchical, and we're not going to touch the REST API. So we're going to save our changes. You can see now we've got slightly different options. So you've got add accommodation location fields, link existing field groups, or create a new post type this time. Now we don't want another post type. We do want to create another taxonomy though. So we're going to click on taxonomies, and we're going to add a second one in. So we're going to do the same kind of thing again. We're going to do accommodation types. Again, we'll copy that from there, put our singular label in, let that create the taxonomy automatically. What post type you want to select and link this to. This can be linked to accommodation. Again, we're going to use hierarchical, come into advanced configuration, come into labels, come into visibility, make changes to anything we want in there. So we're going to show this in the admin column, and we're basically going to leave it at that. Save our changes, and we've now done probably 2/3 of what we need to do. So we now come over to accommodation. You'll see we now have those two new taxonomies. So accommodation location and accommodation types. So first of all, let's take a look at the all accommodation. You can see there's our new custom taxonomies, and because we've set these to show up in the UI, you can see there's accommodation locations and accommodation types. These now will be available to us and listed inside the accommodation section. Just makes kind of finding things a little easier. If we come in now to accommodation locations, we'll click on there, and you can see now we can go ahead and start adding in any kind of information we want. So let's add a couple of different locations in. You simply go ahead, type the name in. We don't need to set anything else up inside here. We're going to simply leave it at that, add a new location, and I'm going to repeat this process for a couple more locations. There we go. There's our locations all set up. I can repeat the process now for accommodation types. So if we click on accommodation types, you see this looks pretty much exactly the same. So all we need to do is give this a type. So we're going to say this is a hotel. We'll say add new accommodation type, and there's our hotel. So I'm going to, again, repeat this a couple of times for the various different sections. And again, there we go. There's now all our accommodation types set up. Now, before we move on, let's go and take a look at adding a new accommodation in. So you'll see if we come into adding a new accommodation, we've got our title, we've got our information, our detail, our content, whatever you want to call it. If we come over to the accommodation section, then we've got our two custom taxonomies, our location and our types, and we've got featured image. Now you can ignore the layout options. These are all to do with GeneratePress. So you may not see these if you're not using GeneratePress. And that's all we've got. But if you want to put things like prices, additional information, contact details, and so on, we could put those into the content area, but it's not really the nicest way. So what we're going to do is we're going to add some custom meta fields to our custom post type. So let's hop back out of here. Let's come back into ACF, but this time we're going to choose the option for field groups. Now, when we're in field groups, this is where we can go ahead and create custom meta fields. Now, meta fields are basically things like your title, your content, your description, your excerpts, and so on. They're just normal standard meta fields as part of WordPress. And we can create our own custom ones, and we can associate those with pretty much anything we want inside the WordPress dashboard itself. So for this example, let's go ahead and add a new one in. We're going to give this a name of accommodation details. Now, before we add those fields in, let's just scroll down a little bit and just check our settings and make sure that everything is set up correctly before we add those fields in. So you can see, first of all, we've got location rules. We open this up, you can see there's an awful lot of different options inside here, including things like your post status, your format, your categories, and so on. By default, post type is selected. Then you've got your option to is equal to or is not equal to, and then you've got basically whatever the option is. So in this example, post type is equal to your standard built-in WordPress posts and pages and so on. You've also got our new custom post type, which is our accommodation. However, if we change this to something like post template, you'll see we get different options then in the third dropdown. Again, change this to something like post format, and you'll get different options inside there for the normal WordPress formats. We'll set this back to post type, and we say is equal to accommodation. So what this does now is this will connect these new meta fields up to our new custom post type accommodation. But you could easily add additional rule groups in. So if you wanted to have these fields associated with multiple different post types, you could do that if you wanted to. This example doesn't make a lot of sense. So okay, we'll leave that as it is for now. Next up, we're going to go ahead and start adding in some new custom fields. Now, the latest version of ACF makes this whole process really nice and simple. You've got your field type, and you can, if you want to, choose from any of the field types that you have access to on the free and or the pro account. or you can click on the Browse Fields option. And this will give you just a little bit more information about what each of these fields actually does. So you can see inside here, we've got a range of different types of fields, from the simple like text and numbers and so on, right the way to more complex things like flexible content repeaters. Now these are pro features, so we're not even going to touch those. But you can, if you want to, filter things down just to go and grab exactly what you want. So for this example, we can come into basic, we can choose text, we can give this a name, we'll put in address, and if we want to find out more information, on the right hand side it gives us a little overview, and if we want to access the documentation, you can click on the documentation link, and that will take you then over to ACF, the documentation for that specific field type. It's a nice simple way of jumping over to any additional information you want to find out if you need a little bit of help on what any of these custom fields or these custom meta fields actually do. So we've set up exactly what we want, which is just a standard text field called addressed. We'll hit select field, and you'll see now that pre-fills out the basic information. If we want to, we can come into validation. We can make this a required field, and we can drop in a character limit. So if you want to limit the amount of text we can put into any of these boxes, you can do that here. You've got presentation, which allows you to drop things like instructions, placeholder text. You can prepend or you can append the information. And in certain circumstances, that would make sense. With this, it doesn't really make a lot of sense. So we can then go ahead and we can apply a wrapper width to this, and we can also set a custom class or a custom ID. And finally, you've got conditional logic, which allows you to show and hide fields based upon the status of other fields inside your custom meta field group. So what we're going to do is we're going to come back to general, and we're going to just say close that. We're going to add another field in. This time we're going to browse the fields. For this, we're going to come into basic, and we're going to say this is going to be a number. We're going to set this to be telephone. Select our field. We can come into validation. Again, if you want to make this required, you see we've got slightly different options for minimum value and maximum value. Presentation, again, is pretty much the same. So let's set this to be 50%, and we don't need to worry about conditional logic. Next up, we're going to add another field in. This time, we're going to just set this to be a URL field, and we'll just say website. What we're going to do in this, though, is we're going to come into the validation option, set this to be required, come into presentation. So inside there, we're going to drop some instructions to tell people they need to include the full link, and we're going to put some placeholder text. It'll have this inside the actual entry itself, ready for people to type in. We're going to set this again to be 50%, and we're going to close that field down. Next, we're going to add another one in. So add another field in. This time, instead of going to the browse fields, let's just do it this way. We're going to come in and choose the email option. Field label, we're going to put in email. Field name, email automatically fills out. Validation, required. Presentation, we'll set this to be 50% again. Add another field in. For this is going to be the starting price. So again, we're going to come in, we're going to choose the option for a number, or this starting price, or starting price. Pre-fills the next options out. Validation, yep, we want to make that required. Presentation, we'll set that to be 50%. Finally, we're going to add one more field in. So we're going to add one final field in. This time, we're going to set this to be a WYSIWYG editor, or what you see is what you get editor. So it gives us a nice sort of way of adding in bold and sort of italics and things like that. So we're going to put in contact information, come to presentation, and inside there, you can see we've now got slightly different options. These are all context sensitive. So you can see we can set the visual and text, visual only or text only. So for this, we're going to say this is going to be visual only. The editor, we're going to set to be basic, so it's really simple, so we don't have sort of file upload options, and we'll disable that. We'll say delay initialization, and we'll set this to be 100%. We'll now close this field down, and just come down to our settings, check our presentation. If you want to customize the way this looks, you can do that. And you want group settings, you can also set up options inside here. For this, we don't need any of that. We can simply go ahead and say Save Changes. And now let's go back to our accommodation and click on Add New. And now you see we've got all the things we had before, but we now have all these additional details underneath that are specific to working with our accommodation custom post type. When I click to initialize your contact information, you can see we get things like our bold, italic, and underline, and so on inside here. So we've now created additional custom meta fields, associated those with our custom accommodation post type. So we're pretty much almost done. There's one more thing I want to do. If we hop over to our live test website, you can see when we come to the various different sort of types, for example, this luxury and opulence, we've got this hero image. However, if we come into hotels and inns, we have a different image. So this is using, again, a custom meta field. So let me show you how easy it is to combine this with not just sort of post types, but with other features as well. So we're coming back into ACF, back into our field groups. We're going to add a new field group in. Again, we're going to give this a name. We're going to call this property type additional details. So what we're going to do is we're simply going to create one single field. We're going to change the type over to image. And what we're going to do is we're going to give this a name, and we're going to call this header image. Field name will automatically fill out. Then we can choose the return format. In this, all we want is the image URL. So when we upload an image to our additional details in our property type, we'll have a link saved in the database that we can then use to reference to dynamically display a header image based upon whatever of the property types they're actually looking at. Once you've done that, you can see we can upload this to the post, or we can upload it to the entire library. For this example, we'll leave it to the library. Validation, we're going to set that to be required. Presentation, we're going to leave that as it is. And conditional logic, again, we don't need to set anything on there. What we do need to do, though, is come down to the settings, and inside there, we're going to change this from post type. We're going to scroll through until we find taxonomy, and then we're going to just come over and we're going to choose the option for accommodation type. So we've now associated this with the accommodation type field. Save that. And now if we come over into our accommodation and accommodation types, we now have a new field that says add an image. And this is where we can add in our custom header image. We'll add some data in a moment. So that kind of wraps up the ACF section. We've set up the structure that we want to use. We created our custom post type, custom meta fields, associated those with our custom post type, and also our custom taxonomies for grouping everything together. So that's all that ready now to start accepting data, and then we can start to build out the templates and the design side of things. So adding content to our new custom post type is pretty much exactly the same as adding content to WordPress in general. All we do is come into accommodation and click on add new. Now we can give this a name. We can drop in a description. We can go to the accommodation option on the right hand side. We can choose where this actually is. We'll say this is Canada. We'll say this is luxurious. We'll give it an address. We'll give it a fictitious telephone number, drop in the website address, and again you can see there's our little note instructions how to use it, and also the pre-filled information inside the actual block itself. We'll drop in an email address, and we'll drop our starting price in. And then if we want to, we can drop in some contact information, and it's kind of like instructions for how you want to contact people, for example. I'll simply just grab a little bit of text from here and pop that inside there. Finally, let's go add our featured image. I've already uploaded some, so we're just going to select an image from here. And now basically everything is set up for this first property, this first accommodation. Now the nice thing with working this way is that we can still take advantage of all of the features we have as part of Gutenberg. So where, for example, we are using not just Gutenberg, we're also using GenerateBlocks. If I want to, I can easily come in and I can use any of the GenerateBlocks options. So things like tabs, grid, the accordion buttons and so on, or any of the native standard WordPress options as well. So we can customize the look and feel of this very easily. For example, we may want to drop in something like a gallery. Let's just choose the option for gallery. We'll choose our media library. We'll select a bunch of images from here and we'll create a new gallery. We'll insert that. And now we've got our gallery inserted into our page, and we can use the options then to customize this over on the right hand side. And any options you have associated with any of these elements, you can easily go ahead and make changes to them to customize it. So once we're happy, we click on publish. We'll choose to publish the article itself or the accommodation itself, and let's go ahead and view this. And you can see there's our new accommodation inside the standard default layout for GeneratePress. So we'll customize that in a moment, but you can see how easy it is to go ahead and start adding in your custom information using a combination of the standard Gutenberg features alongside the options we've added in for those custom meta fields using ACF, and how we can organize everything then by using the options for our accommodation location and our accommodation types. So there's the first part of this done. I'm going to go ahead now and add a few more properties in so we've got a bit more accommodation set up ready to go. There we go. We now have a couple of different accommodation entries in our database. As you can see, our accommodation locations and our accommodation types are also listed inside here as well. We can click on any of these and jump straight over to that, and we can filter the properties down based upon that. So it's pretty cool and pretty easy to see how to go ahead and set things up inside here. So we've now added in some data. we're now ready to move on to start building the actual design and pulling in that dynamic data into our design, creating some templates and fleshing out our overall website. So now we've got the basic data all sorted out. The next thing on our list is to go ahead and start building the actual design itself. So the first thing we're going to need to do is set up some of our basic parameters in GeneratePress itself. And to do that, we simply come over into Appearance and into the Customize option. Inside here, you've got your normal standard customizer for WordPress with obviously a range of options geared towards GeneratePress. So we can come in and very easily handle things like the layout. So for example, the container, we can set exactly how we want this to be, the size of it, and so on. But I want to go through all of this step by step because let's be honest about it, if you're following along with a tool like working with ACF and dynamic data, you're probably more than accustomed to dealing with this aspect of things. And just for ease to make your life so much quicker and easier, if you want to follow along with this tutorial, I've already gone ahead and made the download for the settings that I've used available in the description down below. So all we're going to do is hop out of this. We're going to come into the options for Appearance and down to GeneratePress, scroll to the bottom, and we're going to choose the option to import. So I'm going to choose my file. This will be linked, like I say, in the description down below. All we need to do is click on Import, click OK, and that's now going to import the settings, the color schemes, and all those things for us. So now we've got the basics all set up. Let's go in now and just create our menu structure, just so we've got things laid out and we can start to build things out with the information in place. Let's hop back into our dashboard. Let's hop over into our menu section. Let's create our main menu. We'll set this to be primary and off canvas, and we'll click Create Menu. Let's open up the screen options at the top, and we're going to choose accommodation location and accommodation types. Close that down, and now we can reference those inside our navigation. So first of all, let's come to our pages, say View All. Let's select our home page and add that into our structure. There's our first page link. So next up, we need to go ahead and add in our locations and our types. Now, what we want to do in this example is we want to have a drop-down menu. So the easiest way to do that is, first of all, come into our custom links. We'll put a null link inside this. We'll just put the little hash or pound if you're in the US, and we're just going to put this as locations. Add to menu, do the same again, and we'll call this property type, add to menu. So now what we can do is we can use the options underneath and we can add those in. So we'll say View All for the locations, we'll say Select All and Add to Menu, and all we need to do is just quickly go ahead and organize these. We'll repeat the process now for the accommodation types. Again, View All, Select All, Add to the Menu, and just quickly set these up to be a second level navigation. There we go. Let's save our menu, hop over to our test page, refresh this, and we now have our locations and we have our property types. If we click on, for example, hotels, you can see this will now use the default template to show us the hotels. Same if we come into luxurious, for example, you can see this again then shows the basic template. And finally, if we come into locations and we choose something like, let's try Italy, again, this will now show us all of the different properties. And we could leave it like that, but that doesn't really look very interesting. So the next thing we need to do is go ahead and start to create the templates for the various different pages, the various different layouts, and so on. To do that, inside GeneratePress, we use what are called elements. Now, elements are basically either full templates or template pieces. We can access this in a couple of different ways. If you've got the bar available on the front end of your site, you can click on the elements option. And as you create elements, this will put inside brackets afterwards the number of elements that are being used on the page that you're currently looking at. The second way we can do this is come back into our dashboard. Under Appearance, we've got elements inside here, or again at the top, we've got elements at the top on the quick menu. Let's choose elements from whichever you prefer. And this will now show us the Add New Elements. So this will list all the elements we have, including the type, the location, exclusions, users, and date it was created, and so on. Let's click to add a new one, and we've got 4 different elements we can choose from. We've got blocks, hooks, layouts, and headers. For most use cases, blocks are what we're going to use. And we're going to start off by creating a custom footer. So we'll choose Options, we'll choose Block, and we'll click on Create. This will then take us into what looks like a standard page with some additional information available at the bottom and also on the right-hand side. So first of all, let's give this a name. We'll call this General Footer. We'll come over then to the right hand side underneath the block element. You can see element type is set to hook, but we can choose a range of different template and options inside here. So for this, we want to set this to be the site footer. So that now will become the global footer for our overall design, unless we override it by using the display rules underneath. So at the moment you've got location, exclude and users, and these in combination with each other can be very comprehensive. But for this example, we just want to set the location to be entire site. And now we can go ahead and create our design for our footer. Now for ease in this example, we're just going to use one of the pattern library templates. We'll set our category to be footer, and we'll choose one that I think is in keeping with what we're trying to create. For this example, we'll choose this security eye. And all we can do is we can customize the look of this to make sure that it's all in keeping with the color scheme and so on that we're using. Once we finish styling everything, we can go ahead, click on publish, hop back out of here, and you see there's our general footer with all the information about the location and any exclusions and so on. Come out to our front end, we'll refresh this page, scroll to the bottom, and there you can see is our footer. Okay, so the page that we're currently on is the kind of loop page. You can see we've got multiple different sort of properties inside here. So let's focus on that template first. This is probably the most complex of the templates we're going to work on. Let's come back over to the dashboard to keep things nice and simple. What we're going to do is we're going to add a new template. We'll choose our type and set that to be block and click on create. We'll give this a title. So what we need to do is change our element type from hook, and this time we're going to choose a loop template. This now tells it that we're going to create this and use this for working with our loops. In this example, the location template. Going to come down to our location options to set our rules up, and you can scroll through and you can see you've got all the standard options, things like for search results and so on, and posts. But if you scroll further down, you'll see there's our custom post, our custom taxonomies and so on, all listed inside here. So we want to come down and we want to choose the accommodation location archive, because we're going to set this to be an archive page. We'll choose that option and say all accommodation locations. And for example, let's just click on publish now before we make any changes. Hop back over to our page and refresh. And you see now we have nothing on here because the template is working, but we haven't actually created that loop layout yet. Let's come back in. We're going to open up our list view from the left-hand side, and we're going to go and add in our first element. So we're going to add a container in. This is using the latest version of GenerateBlocks, so we now have the inner container and full flexbox control, so we can choose to insert an inner container. And now what we have, if we open this list up, is we've got a container and we've got a container sitting inside it. So the first container is full width. The container that sits inside is whatever width we've set the editor up to be. And now we can put whatever we want inside there. So our container selected, we'll click on the plus, add a container, go back to the container above, click on the plus one more time and add another container in. So we now have two containers sitting inside our inner container. So what we're going to do is we're going to choose the first container, come over to the right hand side to our sizing and set this to be 20%. Choose our second container, again come to the right hand side, set this to be 80%. Currently nothing actually happens. So what we need to do is go back to our inner container, the second container down the stack. We'll choose that, come over to our layout, and we're going to set this to be flex. And now we have our containers sitting side by side. We can also come in and set a column gap. So we're going to set this to be 50 pixels. So we have a nice gap between the left and the right hand sides. And then if you want to, you can control things like the alignment of the items and the spacing and so on, all those kinds of useful things. So because we want these to be at the top of each of these, we don't need to set anything because it defaults to the first value, even if it's not selected. So with that being said, we've now got our basic element set up. The left-hand side, we'll leave that for now until we go and start to create our facets and filters, and then we'll come back and revisit those. But let's go and select our second container, our main container on the right-hand side. Click on the plus. We're going to search for loop. I'm going to choose the query loop that's in blue, which is the native function inside GenerateBlocks. So we'll choose that. Then it asks us what type of query loop do you want to create, and there's a range of different predefined layouts to choose from. We'll choose this one with a thumbnail. And you see that now fills everything out for us. But what it's doing is this is currently pulling in the posts, not necessarily what we want. So what we need to do is come out to the right-hand side underneath the query loop, and we're going to say inherit query from template. But you can see at the moment, we've got posts selected. So if you wanted to make sure that you've got the right data inside here to style everything, you can change this to accommodation. That will then show your accommodation information. And then if you choose the option for inherit query from template, you can see that now retains the information inside you. So what you can do is, if we expand the query loop out from the left-hand side, you can see it all sits inside a grid. And this grid has one template inside it. And if we hover over that, you can see we've got a blue outline around, in this example, dreams. Inside there, you've got image, post title, post date, and post excerpt. And again, as we hover over, they highlight in an outline. So what you do with this is you design the first template, and then all of the other templates will pick up the exact same design styling. So you only need to do it one time, and then everything else inside your loop will pick up that exact same style. So what we need to do now is customize the styling to get the look and feel that we want. So what we need to do is select any of these items and start customizing things. So we grab the post template, for example, come over to the options on the right-hand side. You can see we've got our spacing options, which we can go ahead, remove those options from there. So now we've removed the padding and everything else, we can start to customize other aspects. So we're going to come into our colors, for example. We're going to change our background, clear that. I don't want a background on there at all. So we kind of blanked those out to get back to a blank starting point. So what we can do now is we can come into each of these different elements. So choose our image, for example. Come over to our spacing. We can set our border radius. We'll link those together. We'll set that to be 8. We get the nice rounded edges. You can come underneath then, you can start to customize any of these other text options. Now we're not going to worry too much about styling those at this point in time. We can worry about that a little later. What we're going to do is we're going to come into the post date and we're going to remove that. We'll select the option where it says post excerpt is not supported. Well, it actually is. So if we go ahead and update this, take a look at our front end now and refresh, you can see this actually pulls in the relevant data. So we've got our image, we've got our title, and we've got our read more information underneath. So let's come back in here, choose our post excerpt, come over to the right-hand side and open up dynamic data. You can see everything is filled out, and all we need to do is change the excerpt length, and we'll set this, for example, to 25. This could be 25 words. Again, if we update this, pop back over, refresh, we now get a more succinct version. So now we've sort of creating our cards, we've got our basic data in there. We want to go ahead and add in our own custom information from our ACF meta fields. Now to do that, all we need to do is select any of these fields that we want. We're going to click the 3 dots and we're going to say insert after. This then pulls in the type to choose a block. So we're going to just put the / and we're going to choose the option for a headline, which again is one of those native functions that we have as part of GenerateBlocks. We change this from H2. We're going to set this to be a div in this example. Come over to the right hand side and we're going to choose the option under dynamic data to enable dynamic data. Your current data source is set to current post by default, which in this example is perfectly fine. We'll leave that as current post. Then you've got select content source, and you open that up and you look inside there and you can't see your ACF meta fields. Don't worry, we have access to that. What we're going to do is we're going to choose the option for post meta, because this is now custom meta information. And you see that post meta field. We're getting somewhere. We can click on there and there's no options. So how do we actually go about getting the information in here? Let me just show you. It's very easy. Let's open up a new tab. Let's hop over into our ACF, into our field groups. Open up our accommodation details, and there's all the actual meta field names that have been created for us. So for this example, we want to grab the address. We've got a nice simple quality of life. We come over where it says address under name. We click on it. That's now copied that to our clipboard. Come back over. In the post meta field, click inside there, and all we're going to do is we're going to paste in that address and click on add address. Now, obviously, you don't have to copy and paste it. If you know what it is, you can simply type it in and again, do the same thing. What we've done now is we've dropped in the actual information for that. So what we can do is we can come up to the icons. We can open up a general icon and we're going to add in a little map pin. We're going to come to our icon colors and we'll set that to be our sort of coral color, and we'll just click on update. Now it says meta value inside here. So what exactly is going on? Well, don't worry about that. We come over to the actual live site and refresh. You can see that's replaced by the proper full dynamic information. So it is being pulled in correctly for us. It just doesn't do it in the dashboard. We just need to bear that in mind. It's going to kind of put the placeholders in there for us. Now next up, we want to add the location. In this example, the country. So what we can do is we can simply select this, we can duplicate it. So we can just choose the option on the 3 dots, say duplicate, And now we can just make some changes. So we're going to disable the enable dynamic data this time. So we'll remove that from there. Now you may be wondering why. It's because we kind of have a bit of a mishmash between using the dynamic data on the right hand side, and in some instances we have to use the database icon that's part of the kind of the default options. So we'll choose dynamic options. From here we can choose the option for a list of terms. We can choose the terms, and you can see there's our accommodation location and accommodation type. We'll choose the accommodation location. We can use the comma to separate it if it's in multiple locations, which it can't really be. And before text, we can just say location. Dynamic link, we can say term archive. So what this will do is it means that it'll add this, make it a link. In other words, we can click on it, we can look at the other ones that are in the same locations. It's just a nice quality of life kind of update. We'll put a space after that. Actually, we'll put a colon in as well. If you want to change the icon, you could do that very easily. Just come back over to your icon options. Come back in and choose something different. So for this example, we'll just choose an option for a little check mark. And then we're going to add one more in underneath. So we're going to do the same again. We're going to duplicate this. We're going to disable the option here. So we're going to just change that, set that to be choose. And we're going to come back and use our option for dynamic data. To enable our dynamic data. Current post is perfectly fine. Post meta is fine. We're going to clear the address. Come back over to our field groups. And we're going to grab the website. So we're going to just click on there. Go back in, click, paste that in and add it. The link source, we're going to set this to be post meta. And then you can see you can choose the meta fields you want. So we can click on there. See again, nothing is showing inside this. So we're going to just paste in our website one more time and add that in there. And you see it says link type. We'll choose that. And for this example, we're going to leave it as default. But if you were setting this up to be an email link or a telephone link, you can choose that from there and it will make it into a link with the relevant information, the relevant HTML code beforehand to make that link clickable so you can automatically start to phone someone or you can open up your email client. So it's pretty cool that's inside here. We'll choose default and we're going to say remove block if link is empty. So we've got a little bit of kind of conditional logic being applied here. So we've put in what we want in here. Let's choose our image and just make sure that this is linked as well. So you can see if we select it, come over to our dynamic data, link source is set to be select. We're going to choose that and we're going to say to go to single post. So we've now set this up to click the image to take us over to the single post. We can click the title to take us over to the single post. We can click on terms to take a look at the different sort of locations, and we can click on the meta value to jump to the website. Click on update. Come back over to our page, refresh that, and you see all our relevant info is inside there. If we come to a different location, for example, we'll try Spain. You can see that's now updated. If we click on Spain on here, that'll again show us Spain. Obviously, we've only got one property showing on here, but you can easily come in and sort things out by using that kind of same logic. So what we can do now is we can customize the look and feel of this just to make sure it looks a little bit nicer. So I'm going to do that behind the scenes so you don't have to watch me doing this. And there we go. After a little bit of styling, we now end up with something that looks considerably nicer. If we hop over, you can see this is what we've got. There's one final thing I want to do on this particular template. I want to have the cost per day over on the right-hand side next to the title itself. What we're going to do is we need to kind of put this into a little block. Now, there's multiple ways you could do this. This is just one of the simple ways of working. So what we're going to do is we're going to go up to our image. We're going to choose the option for insert after. And what we're going to do is we're going to search on there, and we're going to just do a search for grid. We'll insert that. We'll choose a 50-50 grid. And then all we need to do is open that up and expand it. We'll grab the post title, pop that into the first grid item. We'll choose our second. And that's where we're going to drop in our dynamic data. So like we've done before, we'll click on the option, insert a headline. We're going to set this to be a div. We're going to set this to float over to the right-hand side, and we're going to go ahead and add in some dynamic data. So for this, we're going to be using the starting price. So we're just going to copy that, come back over, and inside here, we're going to come into enable dynamic data, current post, select our source type is going to be post meta field. We're going to paste that inside there and click on add starting price. And we're not going to worry about link source. That doesn't actually have any relevance. And finally, we're going to come up to our colors, and we're going to set our text color to be this kind of coral color. And we're going to change the weight and the size of this. So we're going to come into our typography. We'll make this a little bit heavier. We'll say this is going to be 500. And we'll set this to be something like 14 pixels. It doesn't really matter too much. Actually, let's go up 15. Okay, so we'll click on update. Hop over and take a quick look. So as you can see now, we have our prices starting, but we have a real lack of information going on. What does this 229 and 179 even mean to anybody? Well, we need to address that. We need to put something before and possibly after, depending upon what information you have. So we come back over into our design. You'll see if we click on that entry, we can't actually add anything else in. So how do we deal with this? Well, we can use a little nifty CSS trick. So what we're going to do is we're going to close all of these down. We're going to come down to the advanced option. So what we're going to do is we're going to give this a class, and we're going to call this PricesStart, and that's all we need to do. So we're going to click on update, and we've now applied a custom CSS class to that specific entry. How about if you go back into a Customiser? Inside the Customiser, we're going to come over to our locations, and we're going to open up Italy. And there you can see our values. Going to come into our additional CSS, and we're going to simply paste in this little bit of code which we listed down below so you can use exactly what we've got. But let me just quickly explain what's actually happening here. The first thing we have is the PricesStart CSS class. So this is targeting that CSS class we've just applied to the price per day. Then we've got a pseudo class, in this example, after, and then we've got content. And it's telling us that we want to, after this particular class, we want to put some content in, and this example is the /day, and then we've got PricesStart before, so it's basically the same thing, but it just says the content goes before, and then we've got from, and in this example, pounds. So you can see this gives us now from £229 per day. We'll click on publish, and we've now added in some custom CSS to give us the ability to put some text before and some text after, so we can address that issue. Come over to our live site and refresh. You can see there's our from 229 per day. Coming to Spain, you can see we've got from 299. If we're coming to Canada, you can see from 279 a day. So we've addressed that issue inside here by using a little bit of CSS code trickery. So pretty cool to see how you can do that. And we have pretty much finished with this accommodation loop template. So we can update, make sure everything is saved and everything is in place, and that's the first of our templates created with some trickery involved in some CSS. So let's move on and start working on the next set of templates. So now we need to address the property type. So if we come in, for example, into the luxurious, as you can see, we've basically just ended up with the same template, the default template. Now you may think we could just simply go ahead and duplicate the template or go and add in some additional conditions to basically use it inside here, but we can't because we want to have slightly different facets being used on these two different templates, but we can speed up our lives. Let's come back over. What we're going to do is we're going to expand things out, and we're going to just copy this container. So we're going to select it, and we're just going to do Control or Command C to copy it. That tells us that's being copied to the clipboard. We're going to come out of here. We're going to create a new template. We're going to again choose this to be a block, click on Create. And now what we're going to do is we're going to set this to be the accommodation type template. Come over to the element type. Again, we're going to set this to be a loop template. We can just easily come in, do Control or Command V. That will insert things into here for us, retaining everything we've just seen on the previous layout. All we need to do now is come down to the location, and we're going to choose a different set of location options. So scrolling down until we get to the accommodation options, and you can see we've got accommodation type archive. We'll select that, say all accommodation types, hit publish, come back over, and now if we refresh, that's now using our new template. And now if we just test things out, we'll go over to, for example, hotel. There's our hotel. Come over to bed and breakfast. You can see there's our bed and breakfast. So we've now created a second template, assign a different set of location conditions to it, and we're now pretty much halfway through creating the templates for this particular design. So now that we've finished creating the basic template structure for the archive pages, the next thing we're going to do is create the template components for the individual property or accommodation design. So the easiest way to deal with this is to go ahead, open up one of our accommodation, and you can see this is still using that default standard layout that we have from GeneratePress. So go to elements, we're going to add a new element. We'll set this to be a block, and we'll click on create. We'll give this a name. We'll call this accommodation hero. Come over to our block element, change this from hook, and we'll set this to be page hero. And we're going to come down to the location and we'll scroll right the way through until we find our accommodation, not the archives. This is just the accommodation. We'll select that. You see it says all accommodation. We'll hit publish just to make sure we save those changes. So now we can go ahead and start to create the overall design. So like we've done before, let's click the plus. Let's go and add in the option for a container. We'll choose an inner container as well. We'll open up our structure. And we've got the basics now for our content. If we take a look at one of our examples, we've got the accommodation type, then we've got the name of the accommodation, and then we've got the actual featured image for the accommodation itself. So this is what we're going to create inside this hero section. So like we've done before, we're going to click to add in a new item. So we'll click the plus, we'll choose our headline like we've done before. We'll set this to be something like H3. Click our database icon, and what we're going to do is we're going to open this up and we're going to choose the option for list of terms. Our taxonomy is going to be accommodation type. Separate is fine, and we're just going to put in accommodation type, and we'll set a dynamic link to be the terms archive. So this will just put in that kind of placeholder. Now obviously we want to change the size of this, so we're going to come into our typography. We'll set our weight on this to be something like 400. And we're going to set our size 1.1 ems. That looks pretty good. Hit update again. Now we're going to come underneath. Going to add another headline. So we'll duplicate this one. We'll set this to be H1 because this is the primary heading on the page. We'll change our sizing and we'll set this to be something like, let's try 3 ems. That looks pretty good. We'll change this to be extra light as well. I like the look of that. And what we're going to do is we're going to change this. So we're going to change this from list of terms, and we're just going to drop in title. Remove anything else. And we don't want any kind of dynamic link because this doesn't need to link to anything. So there's the first two parts of this. We're going to change the color of this as well. I don't want this to pick up the kind of like highlighting color. So we'll set our text. It's a link, so we'll set this to be our dark color, and we'll have no hover color. So we'll just set that to be the same color as well. So now we've set up the majority of our header. The next thing we need to do is go and insert that featured image below the text we've just inserted. So let's do that. The first thing we want to do is insert a new container to contain it that sits inside the parent container itself. With that selected, we're going to click the plus one more time. We're going to choose the image option, and you can see this now allows us to upload an image and so on. However, what we're going to do is we're going to come up to the dynamic data on the right hand side, enable dynamic data. Data source of current post is perfectly fine. Image source is going to be featured image, and the link source is going to be left as it is. We're also going to make sure the image is selected, come up to our border radius underneath the spacing, and set that to be 8 on all 4 sides. That's going to give us a nice kind of round edge. The final thing I want to do is make sure I've got the container that's got the image selected. Come over to our spacing, and we're going to set the margins on the left and right to be auto, just to make sure this is actually centered. We'll pop over to our test page, refresh, and see what's going on. So if we take a look at it now, you can see it's okay, but there's a little bit of refinement needed. We need to put some spacing in and control the size of some various different aspects. So I'm not going to bore you by taking you through and explaining exactly what I'm going to do here. I'm just going to apply some spacing, set some widths, and so on. And there we go. We now have everything laid out the way that I want. So the next thing we need to do is go ahead now and deal with the second part of our template, which is going to be the content area that's underneath. I'm going to add a new template. Again, we're going to choose the option for a block. Click on create. We'll call this accommodation content. Go to the element type, click, and we're going to choose content template. Come down to our location, and again, choose accommodation. And apply to all accommodation. So now what we can do is we can start to flesh things out. Now what I've done with my example is I've used the option inside GenerateBlocks to give us a nice simple tabbed kind of layout. So you can see description on the left hand side with all our content, and then we've got the contact information. So all this is being pulled dynamically from our database from those custom meta fields and information we've created, and we just wrap them up in a nice looking layout. So coming back over into our template, what we need to do first of all is go ahead and insert a container, and insert a inner container inside it. Let's open up our options, and you can see there's everything laid out. So what we're going to do now is inside that inner container, we're going to click the plus to search for tab, and we're going to use the tab option inside GenerateBlocks. For this example, we're going to use the button tabs, but you could use any of these 3 different predefined kind of layouts. So let's choose the button tabs. Now, if we take a look on the left-hand side, this is one of the things I really like about working with GenerateBlocks, is even though we've got these tabs, and the same thing goes with an accordion, it's still all using the default basic containers and button groups and so on we've always had with GenerateBlocks. So it's very, very nicely laid out and created, and expansion is super easy. For this example though, we just simply want to work with the two options. So we can choose our tab buttons, we can select it, and we can then just use our flex options to align that to the left-hand side. We can simply double click inside here like we would with any of the normal buttons inside Gutenberg, and we can just change this. We'll set that to description. We'll set the second one then to be contact information. So that's the basics of our tab buttons. So all we need to do now is come down into the tab items container, and inside there we've got two containers for the first and second tabs. We'll click on the first tab item, click where it's got paragraph, and what we can do is we can simply go ahead, delete that from there. So all we need to do is click on the plus, and what we're going to do now is we're going to search for dynamic, and we've got dynamic content, which is a GeneratePress feature. We'll select that. We can choose the post content, and that will put a kind of placeholder in its place. And that now is basically whatever we put into the content of our individual accommodation post will be filled out inside there. So now what we need to do is come over to the second tab item. We can click, we can remove what's from there, click to remove it. Simply click on the plus. What we're going to do is we're going to insert a headline. We'll set this in this example to be a paragraph. I'm going to come over to our dynamic data on the right hand side and enable it. Current post is perfectly fine. Our content source is going to be post meta, and then we need to put in what meta field we want to use. So if we come back over to our list of meta fields, contact information is what we want. We'll click to copy that, head back over, simply click inside there, paste it, and click add. We don't want any link source. We can leave that as it is. So there's the first part of this done. Let's just check this is all working now. So click on publish, head back over and refresh, and you can see there's our tabs, there's our description, there's our contact information, and we can switch back and forth between those easily. So let's come back in, and we just need to add in a couple more bits of information. So this is going to be like we did with the card loop design. This is going to be the same kind of thing. So let's go ahead and insert a new item underneath. We'll click the plus. Again, we're going to choose headline, but this time we're going to choose the option for a div. Come over to our dynamic data, open that up. Current post is fine. Select. We're going to choose post meta. And again, like we've done before, we need to choose the post meta field. So we can come back over to our list of meta fields. We can copy, for example, the address. Come back over, click and paste that in, add it. Then if we want to, we can set an icon. Like we've done before, we'll use the map pin. We'll set the color to our kind of coral color. Now what we need to do is go ahead and duplicate that. In this example, you can see it's not in the right place, so I'm going to simply drag that into the right location. So what I need to do is just simply go ahead. I can duplicate this a couple of times. We're going to duplicate it. We'll come over to the options. We'll clear our icon. We'll change our post meta. So what we're going to do this time is we're going to come into telephone. We'll copy it, come back over, clear that from there, drop in the telephone, add telephone. We are going to set a link source in this example. So we're going to click the link source. We're going to choose the option for post meta. Like we've just done, we're going to simply drop in the same information, which is add telephone. Scroll down. Link type is going to be telephone. And we'll remove this if it's empty. So that will precede that with the relevant HTML code. So it knows, the browser knows if you click that link, it's going to know it's going to be a telephone number and ask you to dial that number. So finally, we're going to just go ahead. We're going to add in an icon. So we'll go to general. We'll find the phone icon. And we'll just carry on doing the same thing again. So I'm going to add the additional meta fields in now. And then we're going to move on. And there we go. So there's the additional fields now being added in. So again, if we just jump over, refresh, take a look at the contact information. There's all the contact details. And you can see if we hover over, this is going to be a telephone number. This is going to be a website link. And this is going to be an email link with all the relevant info attached to it. So what we need to do now is go ahead and apply a little bit of styling to this to make it all look nice, neat, and tidy. And again, I'm going to do that behind the scenes so you don't have to watch me doing the whole kind of design process side of things. And there we go. There's the final result. You can see everything is styled up. Our content is sitting inside there, and we can switch back and forth easily between the two different design layouts. So that's the overall kind of templating structure pretty much done. If you want to go even further with this, you've seen exactly how to set up your conditions, how to set up your designs, how to then reference them, and those kinds of things. So you should be pretty good to go now to move on and start creating your own designs and expanding upon what I've covered. Now, in the next section, we're going to take a look at how we add the facets or filters into the initial listing sections. We're now ready to start dealing with the facets for our overall design. So we're going to be using GridBuilder WP for this, and the first thing I want to do is hop over into the settings and make sure everything is configured correctly. So first of all, I like to make sure that the delete data on an install is enabled, so if we remove something, it'll delete everything. We're going to leave the display term options, and we're going to set everything else. As you can see, I've got it here. We're going to set the filter custom content, just in case further on down the line you want to filter things based upon additional custom content over what I'm going to demonstrate in this video. That being said, go ahead, save your changes if you made any, and then we're going to head over to all facets. Now, facets is where we create the filters themselves. So what we're going to do is we're going to click on create a facet. We're going to give this a name. Call it location, and we're going to simply put location down in the facet title as well. You can ignore the next two boxes because they'll auto generate once we've created and saved the facet. So head over to behavior. Inside there, we've got 5 different types of facets: your filters, your load, source, apply, and reset. Depending upon which one you choose, will give you different options down below. So for this example, we're going to use filter. We're going to use this to filter based upon the location of the different properties or accommodation properties. So we could use something like checkboxes, we could use a drop down, we could use a range of different types of filter types. For this, we're going to leave it set to checkboxes. Come underneath and we've got filter by. We've got 3 different data sources: taxonomies, WordPress fields, and custom fields. And if you choose any of these, you'll see you get different options underneath, and then you're going to drop down to pick exactly what you want. Now, for our examples, we're going to be using the taxonomies that we created for location and type. So this time we're going to choose categories. We're going to drop that down and choose accommodation locations. We'll select that, and we can leave everything else in that section as it is. You can adjust the filter logic if you wanted to choose between and or, and if you want to set things up for how you display things, whether things are hierarchical and so on, you can set that inside here. So configure this how you want. I'm going to leave this as it is, and I'm going to hit save changes. Once I've done that, that's now committed those changes, and if we come back to the naming tab, you'll see those 2 empty elements, those 2 empty boxes have now been filled out. So what we're going to do is we're going to grab this generated shortcode and copy that from here. Now we can head back over into our elements. So we'll come over into elements, open our templates up, and for this one, we're going to choose the accommodation type template, because inside the type, this is where we can filter based upon location. So we'll choose that from the options. You can see this brings everything back up, and what we're going to do now is open up our list view, expand things out so we can see exactly what we've got on screen, and then we're going to choose our left-hand container, click on the plus, and from there we're going to use the shortcode. Now, even though there's a block for facets, it doesn't work in the way that you expect. Because we're not using native built-in grid feature, we can't actually tag it onto anything. So we're not going to use that. We're simply going to go back to that simple shortcode. So we'll click the plus, we'll do a search for shortcode, we'll click the option, and then we're simply going to paste in that shortcode we just copied. Now, at the moment, this won't actually work because at the moment, you can see it says grid equals 0. Now, it doesn't know what grid that is. It references nothing on our page. So we need to rectify that. So what we're going to do is we're going to choose the grid, which contains our query loop. We're going to come over to advanced, and inside there, we're going to put in a custom CSS class, and we're going to use that to reference based upon the shortcode. Let me show you what I mean. For our example, we're going to be using WPGB-content-1. This references, or this creates a CSS class for this grid. And what we need to do now is come over to our shortcode and take this one out and replace it with what I've just copied in, which is the WPGB-content-1. So this now connects the facet to the grid that we've got that's got the loop of the properties. And that now is going to set things up and work. Now, if you had multiple different grids on here and you wanted the facet to target the correct grid, you just need to make sure that where you've got this CSS class name, you just increment it by 1 each time. So if you had 3 different grids on here, your first one would be WPGB-content-1, the second one -2, the third one -3. And then your facet would target that relevant CSS class. Hope that makes sense. This is a really simple example of how things work. If you want to find out a lot more about how this all works, there's a great video by Jonathan from over at Permaslug, which I'll link in the description below. So you can go through that, check it out, and kind of get an even deeper understanding of how things work. This is a relatively simple setup that we're going to be using in this particular video. So now let's go ahead and click on the update, and now we can hop over and we can test this out. So you can see when we're in any of our property types, in this example, we're in luxurious. We've got one in Spain, one in Canada, and now if we want to, we can filter those based upon this simple option. Choose Canada, and you can see that will now pull up the relevant property or relevant accommodation. So that's how easy it is to create these kinds of facets. So what we're going to do now is we're going to come back over and create another one. So this time we're going to create all facets again. We're going to choose to create a facet, and this time we're going to say sort by price. And this is then going to sort by the information that we've got set in one of those custom meta fields. So again, we'll give it a title. We'll hit the option for behavior. This time we're going to come into the sort option. And now we can enter a label. So we can say order by, and we're going to scroll right the way down to the bottom until we get to numeric custom field. This is one of those custom fields we created. And then our field name, we need to just insert at least something. So we're going to say price. And you can see there's our starting price. We'll select that. We'll add another option and we'll say this is highest, lowest. Again, choose the numeric field. Again, set price inside there. What we need to do now is set our direction. So this is going to be ascending and that one's going to be descending. Hit save changes and come back to naming, and we can copy our little shortcode from there. So again, we can head back into our template and we can now insert this second one. So we're going to do the same again. This time we'll duplicate our shortcode. All we need to do is change our facet number. So what we can do is we can change this to 4 and everything else is perfectly fine. So we'll update this, come back over and refresh. You can see there's our lowest to highest, highest to lowest. And you can see that now updates accordingly. So you can see there's our lowest price one. Flip it on the other way, our highest price one. And if we want to, we can then filter that on a second kind of filter. So you can see how we can start to stack these filters on top of each other to create quite comprehensive sets of filtering for our different kinds of layouts. So we've got one third and final one I want to show you, because if we hop over to locations, for example, we'll go to Italy, which we know we have 2 different locations in. We can go ahead now and we want to set up the same kind of facet or filter for the pricing, but we want to set this up because there's no point actually saying we want this to go on location because these are just in Italy. So this time we want to change this to property types. So come back into our facets like we've done before. We'll create a new facet. We'll give this a name. We'll call it property type. Again, we'll name the facet. We'll come over to our behavior. Filter is fine, checkbox is fine, and what we're going to do, taxonomy again is fine. This time we're going to choose accommodation types, and again we can leave everything else as it is because this is basically pretty much exactly the same as the first method I've shown you. So we'll hit save changes, come back over to our naming. You can see there's our facet, so we can just copy that from there. We'll come back into our templates, hop out of this one and go back into our new template, which is going to be our location. And we'll do the same again, open things up, expand things out, choose our grid, come into advanced, and inside there we'll give it that same name. So WPGB-content-1. We'll click to add in our shortcode. We'll paste that shortcode inside there and we'll just change that to WPGB-content-1. We'll also duplicate this. We'll change this to 4. Which is going to be our sorting, and we'll just click on update. We'll hop over now, refresh our page, and you see there we've got property type, bed and breakfast or hotel, and again we can do the lowest to highest or highest to lowest, whichever way we want to do it. You see that updates, and then we can say bed and breakfast. So you can see everything is being filtered down based upon those different facets that we just set up. And like I say, this is just a really simple example, but repeating the same process and expanding the way in which you set things up, the additional information, how you want to filter things, you can create a really comprehensive site using the simple techniques that I've covered in this entire video. There's a couple of things I want to cover off before we wrap things up. Now, if you remember back when we set up our ACF fields, we also created one for the heroes section when it comes to the different types of accommodation. So how do we go and create that and insert that in? Let's take a look. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a new element. So again, add new. We're going to choose the option for a block and click on create. We're going to call this property type hero. We'll come to our element type and choose the option for page hero like we did previously. And then we're going to come down to the location. For this, we're going to open things up and scroll down until we find the property type archive. Choose that option, choose all accommodation types and click on publish. So now what we can do is we can go and insert our layouts. So we're going to go ahead again, like we've done before, insert a container, insert an inner container, open up our list view. All we can do is we can go ahead and just configure how we want this to look. So let's select our first container. We'll select that. We'll come over onto the options for sizing, and we're going to set the height of this. We're going to use the option for viewport height, and we're going to set this to be 40 or 40% of our viewport height. We'll set a background color, even though we're not actually going to be using that, just so we can see what's going on. And then we're going to come back up right to the top. We're going to set this display to be flex. We're going to set this to be center aligned on the horizontal and the vertical. And then inside that container, we're going to come in and we're going to click the plus. We're going to choose the option for a headline. We'll set this to be H1. And what we're going to do is we're going to click on the database icon. We're going to click and choose the option for title. That's it. We're not going to do anything else. We're going to leave it as it is there. So we can do is we can come over to our typography. We can set our size on here. We'll set this to be something like 5 M's. And we'll set the weight to about 600. There we go. That looks pretty good. Let's come down to our text and set that to be white. So there we go. You can now see exactly what we're doing. Okay, so there's our basic kind of section set up. Now we need to go ahead and set the background image because currently there is no background image. We make sure we select the parent container and we're going to come over to our little database icon, click. You can see dynamic background image, and we can't actually set anything at this point. It's a little kind of weird quirk. So we've got a little workaround. So what we need to do is come over to our backgrounds, choose an image. Doesn't really matter what image we use. We'll select that image from there. And now what we can do is we can come back to that database icon. You can see now we can select it. This time we're going to choose the option for term meta because we're working with taxonomies. We'll choose the term meta. We'll drop in the field name. So if we don't know what that is, come back over, open up our property type additional details, copy the link from there, or copy the name I should say, and then we can simply paste that inside. And if you want to use a fallback image, you can do. We don't want any dynamic link. That's perfectly fine. So we'll click update. Now we can go over to our test page and test this out. And there we go. You can see there's our luxurious, and we've got our background image set inside there. If we go to something like hotel, where there isn't one set, if we come back over into our site, come over into our accommodation types, and this time we'll choose hotel. We can set our header image. We'll choose this one. Hit select and update. Come back over and refresh. And you see there, we now have that hero image at the top of our design. So that's basically how we can set everything up. We've kind of covered most of the basics and ticked all of those off. There's so much further you could take this if you want to, but the key skills that I've demonstrated in this tutorial should set you on a good road or good path moving forward to be able to expand upon this kind of content and create really, truly unique designs for yourself. As always, all the links to everything I've talked about are in the description below. If you've got any comments, questions, or feedback, please do leave those in the comment section. And as always, my name is Paul C. This is WPTuts. Until next time, take care.